Have you ever found yourself staring at a silent phone, utterly paralyzed by a man's sudden and inexplicable withdrawal? You send a thoughtful text, and he retreats into the shadows. You practically beg for a crumb of clarity, and he responds with vague, low-effort nonsense. It feels rather like you are screaming into an absolute void, doesn't it? But here is the brilliant, highly counterintuitive truth about male psychology. The only conceivable way to make a manipulator truly hear you is to say absolutely nothing at all. In fact, attempting to communicate your feelings to a man who enjoys playing with your anxiety is the quickest way to hand him the crown. Today, I am going to teach you a psychological masterstroke known as the dark mirror effect. In the next few minutes, you will discover precisely how to weaponize his own apathy against him, instantly neutralizing his mind games and leaving him completely unnerved, desperately wondering why he is suddenly the one chasing you. Welcome to Destiny's Decree. Let us rewrite the rules of the game, shall we? Let us speak candidly for a moment. You know that dreadful sinking feeling in your chest when hours pass and your phone remains perfectly, stubbornly silent. You're sitting there dissecting every word of your last message, wondering if you were too eager, whilst he is casually doling out what we call breadcrumbing. It is utterly exhausting, isn't it? You are investing the emotional labor of a Victorian novelist, and he is giving you the bare minimum required to keep you on the hook. The natural and frankly quite human instinct is to fix the perceived disconnect. We convince ourselves that if we just explain how his silence affects us, he will suddenly have an epiphany and transform into the perfect gentleman. So you draft that long, emotionally charged paragraph. But sending a 3-page text message to a man who barely manages a hey is rather like pouring vintage champagne down the drain. It doesn't cure his apathy, it simply reassures him that he is the absolute center of your universe. Here's the brutal truth of the matter. Men who engage in these calculated mind games do not view your anxiety as a problem to be solved, they view it as a trophy. In the realm of relationship dynamics, we call this narcissistic supply. Every double text, every tearful voice note, and every passive-aggressive question feeds his ego. He is not genuinely busy, he is merely testing the elasticity of your boundaries, watching to see how far he can pull the rubber band before you snap back into his hands. Picture this scenario. It is a Saturday evening. He's left you on red since noon. Instead of staring at your screen as if it might suddenly dispense gold coins, you should be out, or at the very least, enjoying a brilliant book with a glass of Bordeaux. Most women cannot do this because the silence feels like a punishment, but your frantic reaction is the exact currency he is trading in. He expects you to wait, to fret, and ultimately to chase him, securing his position of power without him lifting a single finger. To dismantle this entirely predictable dynamic, you cannot simply demand respect. You must architect a situation where his manipulative tactics fall completely flat. You see, the moment you stop providing the emotional reaction he craves, the power balance shifts quite dramatically. He relies heavily on your predictability to keep the game going, which leads us to a rather fascinating psychological weapon, one that requires no shouting, no demanding, and absolutely no essay writing. Enter the Dark Mirror Protocol, a masterclass in high-value detachment. The premise is astonishingly simple, yet brutally effective. You become a flawless reflection of his own investment, stripping away any unearned privilege he currently enjoys. If he is treating you as an afterthought, you do not throw a tantrum or demand to be a priority. You simply reflect that exact same lackadaisical energy right back at him. but you do it with the unbothered grace of a woman who has far more important empires to build. Let us look at chronological mirroring first. If this man takes 5 hours to reply to a rather simple message, the absolute worst thing you can do is reply within 5 minutes. You are essentially rewarding his negligence with your immediate availability. Instead, the dark mirror dictates that you match his timing flawlessly, perhaps adding an extra 15 minutes for good measure. If he vanishes for a day, you vanish for a day. You do not explain your absence, you simply allow the silence to stretch, forcing him to inhabit the very void he created. Then we have effort mirroring, which is where the game becomes rather amusing. When he sends you a low-effort, one-word text like cool or nice, your instinct might be to overcompensate and spark a conversation to keep the momentum going. Please do not do his heavy lifting for him. If he gives you a pebble, do not hand him a diamond in return. Match his cool with a polite, breezy yep, and then put your phone away. You are showing him that your charming, engaging self is an exclusive tier reserved strictly for those who earn it. The true secret weapon of this protocol, however, is your internal state, what we might call the phantom smile. The dark mirror completely fails if you are mirroring him out of spite, sitting angrily on your sofa, aggressively counting the minutes until you are allowed to reply. That is still you being entirely controlled by his behavior. True sovereignty means you match his energy because you are genuinely too busy cultivating your own magnificent life to stress over a man who treats basic communication like a chore. When you execute this flawlessly, without a single hint of malice or passive aggression, something quite extraordinary begins to happen. You have entirely removed the emotional friction he was relying upon to feel powerful. He is no longer playing against an anxious, desperate woman. He is suddenly shadowboxing against a wall of serene indifference. And when a man who thrives on control realizes that his silence is no longer a weapon, his mental architecture begins to unravel in ways he never anticipated. The moment you implement this tactical silence, a fascinating psychological collapse begins within his mind. You see, a man who relies on breadcrumbing operates under the quiet assumption that you are permanently waiting in the wings, entirely dependent on his sporadic validation. When that validation is met with your calm, mirrored indifference, his mental framework shatters. He expects you to be anxiously double-texting. Instead, he is faced with a terrifying, absolute void. It is rather like stepping onto a stair in the dark that simply isn't there, a sudden jarring drop in his perceived reality that forces him to question his own footing. This is where the beautiful irony of human nature and male psychology in particular comes into play. Men are fundamentally driven by the pursuit of value and the acute fear of loss. When you match his low effort perfectly, you essentially hold up a mirror to his own complacency, and the reflection is deeply unnerving to him. He suddenly realizes that your attention is not a fundamental human right, but an exclusive privilege, and one he is rapidly losing. The very distance he manufactured to keep you chasing has now become the chasm that threatens to swallow his ego completely. Consider the mechanics of this glorious reversal. He is accustomed to holding the reins of the interaction. If he pulls away, you expect to lean in. But now, when he pulls away, you simply match his stride, pivot gracefully, and focus on your own magnificent affairs. Instead of crying over a blue tick on WhatsApp, you are out enjoying an exquisite dinner or plotting your next business move, leaving his mundane message to gather dust in the digital ether. The panic sets in precisely because he can no longer predict your behavior. To a manipulator, your newfound unpredictability is profoundly unsettling. As the hours tick by, his internal monologue shifts from arrogant certainty to a rather delicious flavor of self-doubt. Has she lost interest? Did she realize her worth? Am I no longer important to her? The exhausting questions he once forced you to ask yourself are now echoing endlessly in his own head. The spell is well and truly broken. He is no longer the elusive prize to be won. You are the sovereign ruler who simply cannot be bothered to entertain peasant games. The energy he previously hoarded is now desperately redirected into trying to win back your focus. He will inevitably attempt to shatter the dark mirror, usually by sending a highly out-of-character, overly affectionate message or making an unprompted phone call just to check in. He is testing the waters, desperate for a spike of your emotional energy to reassure himself that he still possesses the key to your mind. But responding to this sudden panicked burst of effort requires a very specific, calculated discipline. Because if you simply drop the mirror and eagerly run back into his arms at the very first sign of improvement, you will instantly forfeit every ounce of psychological leverage you have just built. So, the next time a man attempts to test your boundaries with silence or calculated breadcrumbing, remember that you hold the ultimate power of reflection. Never negotiate your worth or beg for his attention. Simply hold up the dark mirror and allow his own lack of effort to become his greatest downfall. Now, I have a rather provocative question for you. What is the most ridiculous, low-effort mind game a man has ever tried to play with you? And how exactly did you shut it down? I want to read your most triumphant stories in the comments below. If you are truly ready to stop playing by peasant rules and master the dark psychology of high-value relationships, elegantly tap that subscribe button to join Destiny's Decree and turn on the notification bell. A sovereign queen never misses a strategy session. Stay sharp, stay unbothered, and I shall see you in the next video.